Hello, my name is Chloe, welcome to my channel and welcome to my September wrap-up. So September actually felt like a pretty disappointing reading month, but that's because I came off the back of August where I read the most pages I've read in a month this year. So it was going to be hard to combat that, even with a trip away, even with a lot of travel. I just didn't quite pick the books that were allowing me to storm through 5-star reads. I have learned a little bit about my reading, and what I have been doing is taking books I'm not sure about on holidays with me so that I can unhaul them during my trip when I don't love them. And that is probably the wrong way to go. I probably just shouldn't have those books anymore because it was taking me 2 days to read a 300-page book, and if it's a book that I love, I can read a 700-page book in 2 days. So yeah, I maybe do need to do a bit of a cutthroat unhaul to just double check there's nothing in my collection that I'm not excited about anymore. Anyway, I did manage to read 16 books in September, which is actually one more book than I read in August. However, the page numbers did drop. I still read an amazing number of pages, which was 6,428, but that was a 15% drop on August. That meant I read an average of 214 pages a day, and the average length of the books I was reading was 402, which is where the stats really show because that was 20% less than last month. Overall, my ratings went like this. I had 2 2-stars, 1 2.5 star, 2 3 stars, 2 3.5 stars, 8 4 stars, and 1 5-star. So working from the bottom and getting our way up to the top, the first 2-star book I read was You Deserve Each Other by Sarah Hogle. I had been carrying this book around on so many international trips, kept saying I was going to read it on the plane, and I finally did read it on the plane when I went to Spain on holiday with my family. Sadly, I do not understand the hype about this romance. It was reported to be about a man and a woman who were engaged, and they both had decided that they weren't interested in getting married anymore, but the person who backs out of the wedding first is the one who has to bear the brunt of all the deposits paid and has like a financial implication. I don't really think that's very accurate. I'm taking that from what the blurb says, and I don't think that is accurate to what the storyline is, and I think it becomes very clear very quickly that that's not quite it. So this was a really good second chance romance, but I just don't think it was what it said it was. And yeah, I didn't have the best time with it. I was quite bored. I didn't really care about the relationship either. So yeah, 2 stars for this one. It wasn't a win for me. Also, one that wasn't a win for me is Exciting Times by Nisha Dolan. These kind of books are going to be hit and miss. I call them, as I have said many times before, my normal people kind of books. The literary fiction style of these people are just living their lives doing normal things and we're going to write a book about them and make it sound amazing. Some books like this I absolutely love. I loved Actual Normal People by Sally Rooney. I have really enjoyed The Truants by Kate Weinberg, but unfortunately Exciting Times just didn't really hit the mark for me. I was incredibly bored throughout the whole thing. We're following a young Irish woman who becomes a teaching English as a foreign language teacher, and she starts this kind of relationship with a businessman who's a few years older than her, and I just didn't really care. So normal people living their normal lives, but I didn't care about this life. Like, I didn't buy into it. So 2 stars wasn't a hit for me either. Next up, one that I'm kind of shocked about is Gilded by Marissa Meyer. I've given this 2.5 stars. I just didn't really care about this one. So I ended up listening to it via audio, and it's a Rumpelstiltskin retelling, which is really fun. I found myself quite invested in how they were going to make the Rumpelstiltskin part work, how the fantasy world kind of worked, because we're following Cyrilda, and she draws the attention of the Earl King, who's a very scary, will force you into doing his bidding kind of creepy dude. He locks her in a castle dungeon and tells her that she has to spin straw into gold because she has said that she can do this. So he like abducts her into the castle, says you have to do this for me, and lo and behold, someone comes along and saves the day, and in exchange for a price spins the straw into gold. I did like it at the start, but I found getting towards the end I just cared less and less, and I'm so sorry. It's like 450 pages long. I don't think it really needed to be. There wasn't that much more of a story. There was a great romance in this that I really bought into, so I did enjoy that part. But yeah, overall, it just wasn't a massive hit for me. So unfortunately, this one is leaving my life having been read. Next up, the 3-star reads, of which I have 2, and both of them are older arcs, which is interesting. So the first one is The Club by Ellery Lloyd, and I was kindly gifted this one by Victoria once she'd read it and reviewed it, because she had the arc obligation. This is about a members club called Home. There is a new club opening on a remote island, and a lot of the big concern about this is who is going to be invited to this exclusive club, who is on the list, what price do they have to pay for being there. The whole premise is that if your reputation is everything to you, what would you put on the line to uphold that reputation and not have your dark secrets spilling out? It definitely wasn't bad. I did enjoy the setting of this remote club with a huge power play, but unfortunately it was a little bit forgettable for me. I ended up listening to the audio for some of this while I was just playing games, and yeah, I wasn't really paying the attention that it maybe needed. I don't know whether it lost my attention or whether that was my fault, but yeah, I just didn't really vibe with it. It didn't fully hook me, but I do enjoy the premise of the story. There was a slight mixed media element as well, where we kept jumping into an article written in Vanity Fair, so that was really fun to see the two different, a narrative versus a Vanity Fair article, so I did like that, but it just wasn't anything really memorable for me. So unfortunately it wasn't quite a win, but it wasn't bad. Next up, one that I should have predicted coming in at this rating, to be honest, and do I now stop trying to read this author's work? I don't know. I might still give her a go because it was incredibly quick, and that is Bad Like Us by Gabriella Lepore. I read this book in less than 3 hours, so, you know, the speed that I can get through it is insane. We're following a spring break trip to a remote lodge with 9 teenagers, and one of them dies. We are hearing from what happened up until this death, and then how they're dealing with it after, how the police are dealing with it, and how people are starting to not trust their friends. And it did read incredibly quickly, but I just feel like the mystery wasn't that great. I didn't really feel like I was obsessed with it. It just was a bit so-so. My problem with it, and what caused that not really caring, I think, is the fact there are 9 main characters. So we do have to know quite a lot about each of these 9 to draw our conclusions. And I just felt like it was too many people introduced very quickly. At one point there is a character who is in a relationship with one of the other characters. I'm trying not to give anything away, but she calls 2 people babe. And genuinely, I was over 100 pages in and had to go back to the start to make sure I'd understood who she was in a relationship with. And I was like, is this a typo? Has she called someone who's not her boyfriend babe because he's not actually a character and it's uncorrected, because this is the uncorrected proof. But no, I think it was actually just another character, and that's how she talks. But yeah, there were too many characters for me to care deeply about any of them. Next up, I gave 3.5 stars to Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. I have since unhauled this to my mom because I think she'll really enjoy it. I did really like this one. 3.5 stars is a better than fine rating for me. I don't think it's my favourite Riley Sager, but it's also not my least favourite. We're following a mysterious apartment building called the Bartholomew, and our main character, whose name has escaped my mind, has recently split up with her fiance/boyfriend. She has nowhere to live, no place to go, so she accepts a job as an apartment sitter in the Bartholomew. She'll be paid an insane amount of money to basically keep an eye on the apartment for 3 months. She just can't have any guests, can't stay anywhere else overnight, definitely can't have anyone stay with her overnight, and she can't interact with the other residents of the Bartholomew. So it's very creepy. I did kind of know what was going on the whole way through. Nothing surprised me in terms of good guys versus bad guys, but the actual ending of what was happening was surprising to me. I didn't quite go that far in my head. So I do really like what Riley Sager did with this book. I just don't think it's the best mystery thriller out there. And next up we have I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. This was a 3.5, but it was potentially my most disappointing book because I gave this 5 stars when I first read it. That was back in August of 2018. So it's been a little while, and my reading has definitely changed since then. So I reread the book and I just couldn't quite give it the 5 stars again, or even a 4-star. It's only about 425 pages, but I feel like this story could have been told much more succinctly and I wouldn't have got bored at any point. Is it a problem with my attention span? Am I now figuring this out? But regardless, I just felt like it was a little bit too long for me to really be fully invested the whole time. We're following 2 twins, Jude and Noah. We're hearing from Noah when they were 13 and Jude when they're now 16. So a bit of a dual timeline with the twins. And during the gap between these periods, their mother has died. And it's a lot about how their relationship was with their parents beforehand, and then the loss of their mom in the 16-year bracket. A big problem with this was the chapters weren't existent. They were like 100-page parts while we flipped between the characters, so I wasn't a big fan of that. It was a loss of just constant prose that lost my attention. Overall, the story is really powerful, I think, but I just don't feel like I was as invested as the first time. And yeah, it's really like knocks down in my head how much I love Jandy Nelson's work, which you will see in a dedicated Jandy Nelson reading vlog that I did, which didn't quite go to plan. I've been talking for so long and I haven't hit the 8 4-stars yet, so I needed a tea break. So starting on the 4-star books, these are kind of just all thrown in at 4 stars. There's no better or worse ones in the ranking, but I do have different opinions about all of them, of course. So the first one is Branded Hearts by Al Maria. This is an arc that I was sent to read and I actually had a really good time with this. Saying that, looking back, do I remember anything? This rating may have to be bumped down because I actually don't think I can give you a synopsis of this book. So I did just re-look back at my thoughts and it all kind of came flooding back to me. So I think it's more my brain is occupied right now, not the book didn't do its job. I'm just a little bit scatterbrained from work at the moment. But Branded Hearts by Al Maria is a sister's best friend romance. So we have our police officer in a small town, Bradley, and he has had a crush on his sister's best friend Amelia for years. It's just been a little, oh she's cute kind of crush, but all of a sudden, one day, she needs help and the police officer swoops in and saves the day. And this develops more of a conversation between them instead of a longing from afar, and they start to develop little cutesy crushing feelings on each other. She is a primary school teacher and seeing that, well, elementary school I guess it is, so seeing that relationship between her and the kids in her class was really, really cute. But yeah, overall this was just a very cute romance. If you know anything about me, you know I love a siblings friend romance. Big fan. Sure Cole is too. But yeah, overall was just a very cute time. I probably would consider knocking it down to a 3.5. Maybe I'll consider it more of a 3.75 because it is very, very forgettable. But I would love to reread this one day because then I'm sure I'll get the same enjoyment out of it. The next 4-star book I read is When He Was Wickerd by Julia Quinn, which is book 6 in the Bridgerton series. We're following Francesca and her romance with John Sterling. Yes, John Sterling. I don't want to spoil anything from the books. I don't think it really does, but it does give you a hint in the TV show. It's about John and Francesca who have this very quick and very lovely little romance. But then all too soon, John actually dies. Francesca is left with the comfort of his cousin, Michael Sterling. I really did like this book. It made me feel a hell of a lot of things. Hello, sorry, I've taken a small break. I was rudely interrupted. I don't know how far I got. When He Was Wickerd was a solid Regency romance. It was not the strongest in the Bridgerton series, but I did really enjoy it, so 4 stars. Next up we have The Trail Often Crossed by Amber Cordova, which is another arc that I read this month, and I really enjoyed it. It was a motocross themed romance. I'm not a massive sports romance person, and there are so many Formula 1 girlies out there right now that I was so excited to see a motocross romance because it's pretty much the only sport I know anything about. I really loved that element of it. We had our male and female main characters were actually competing for a spot on like a championship, and they get introduced in not the best way. They meet in a bar that our female main character owns, and it gets a little bit raunchy very quickly before they quite know who the other person is, and then they end up competing for this championship place. So I think it was really fun. It wasn't the strongest romance I've ever read by any means. There was also a suspense element which was very clear what was going on, and I think you could tell from like the first time you met the bad character. but it wasn't, it didn't bring the story down. It just could have been stronger, and then even got a 5-star from me if that point would have been fantastic. But yeah, really did enjoy it, and I'm glad that there's a motocross romance out there. Please let me know if you know any more. Then we have The First to Die at the End by Adam Silvera. I also gave this 4 stars, clearly. Yeah, I did hope that this was going to be a 5-star read, but it didn't quite hit it for me. This is the prequel to They Both Die at the End, which is one of my favourite books of all time, and we're following Orion and Valentino. They are hanging out at the launch party for Deathcast. If you haven't read They Both Die at the End, Deathcast is a service that calls you on the midnight to 1 AM, I think it is, of the day you're going to die to tell you that this is your last day. So Orion and Valentino are at the launch party for Deathcast, and one of them gets a call. They have just met at this launch party, and it follows their next 24 hours. Really thought I was going to be slightly more heartbroken at this, but it didn't quite hit me. And I think that's because the premise in They Both Die at the End is so shocking. It's so, oh my god, what would I do on my last day? Like, you have all those extra thoughts about it, but when you read another book in the same scenario, you don't have all those shocking revelations of what you would do with your last day. So you are just focused on what these characters are doing, and it's not that that was weak, it just wasn't as strong and shocking for me as They Both Die at the End. I will be holding on to this. I have a really cool exclusive signed edition, so I'm really glad I have this on my shelves. I would reread it. It just wasn't the most emotionally heartbreaking thing I've ever read, and when I compare that to They Both Die at the End, it had to be a 4, not a 5. Then I have The Exception to the Rule by Christina Lauren, and this is a little novella. It's one of those prime reading romance novellas, and I had a really good time with it. I don't think you'll ever see 5 stars to a novella from me, but this was really solid. I read it on my phone sitting around the pool, and I just had a fantastic time. Unfortunately, it is another very forgettable book for me, but it was mostly told through emails, and it was 2 people communicating on a college email address, and one of them types the email address for their professor wrong. So they end up emailing another student, and it's Valentine's Day. So they email the other student, they say, sorry, this isn't the teacher, but happy Valentine's Day. And it becomes an annual tradition to email this randomer they met through college emails on Valentine's Day. It's very, very sweet. I thought it was really cute. It would have been 5 stars if it was a full-length book. I really did enjoy it. They then move through high school. No, it's a high school email, not a college email. They move through high school into college, and they don't actually give any personal information about who they are, where they're from, what college they've gone to. But yeah, I just think it's really adorable. I had a great time with it, and I wish it would be extended to a full book. Then we have Finding Olivia by Michaela Smeltzer, which I also read around the pool, and I loved it. I loved it. 4 stars though, because it wasn't perfect. But we're following a girl, Michaela, who is raised in a very strict household. Her dad is a pastor, and she goes away to college, and one night her car breaks down and she meets this bad boy looking mechanic. They hit it off straight away. He's flirting with her, asking her out on dates, and yeah, she's just quite reserved because she hasn't had the opportunity to have all of the typical teenage experiences because of her very strict upbringing. So the whole book is about finding who she really is, what she's actually interested in, and developing their relationship. It was very dark and disturbing at points. There is quite a lot of dark content in here about her upbringing and her parents, particularly her dad. So not a very light one to go into, but I did have a really good time with it, and I will be reading the sequel. Only 3 books left now, so we'll try and hurry it up a little bit. We have The Sky Is Everywhere by Jandy Nelson, which I gave 4 stars to, and it's a great disappointment to me because I remember this being one of my favourite books of all time. I think I gave it 5 stars, then 4, then 5, now it's back down to 4. We're following Lenny, whose sister has died, and she is leaving poetry out on scrap pieces of paper, floating in the wind, and we get to see those in the book, printed out. Lenny finds comfort in her sister's death with her sister's boyfriend, at the time of her death, and she's very conflicted about how they are finding solace in each other. She's also met this new guy at school called Joe, who is in her band, and they're hitting it off, but she just feels really guilty for having romantic feelings while she should be grieving for her sister. Overall, I do really like this book. 4 stars is obviously a very good rating, but it just didn't hit me the same way it has done on previous reads, and I actually think I might have outgrown it. I don't think I need to keep reading it over and over again, and for that reason reason, I think it might be seeing itself out of my collection, which is hurting me quite a lot, especially because in my unhaul pile that's next to me, I have the other cover of this book, which I went and got this cover so that it matched I'll Give You the Sun and I could keep them both forever. But I actually think they're all on the way out of my collection. I don't think I need this book anymore, which is weird, giving it in a wrap-up video 4 stars and saying I don't need it anymore. Oh god, my unhaul pile is now falling apart. It wasn't as memorable to me, and 4 stars is a great rating, but in this case it's actually disappointing because this was a favourite book of all time. But hey ho. It's all good. Moving on to another 4-star that will be staying in my collection, we have Saving Six by Chloe Walsh. This is my example of a 600-page book I can read in 2 days. I pretty much read it in 2 sittings, to be honest. We're following Aoife and Joey, who are introduced in book 1 and 2, Binding 13 and what is it? Saving 13? Keeping 13 is right behind me. Saving Six follows Joey, who is Shannon's brother from those books, and it is really, really good. We're following the build up to how he is in these books, because in those 2 books I was like, I'm not that convinced I need to get to know Joey as a character, but knowing the backstory that we don't hear in that, this book finishes like 100 pages into the first book there. We have so much to catch up on. I'm sure that's coming in the next one down there, which is like 1,000 pages long. The only reason I can't give this 5 stars, I do go into a little bit more detail in my reading vlog, which also falls into the Jandy Nelson reading vlog. I have some family history with drug addiction, and this is very centered on Joey dealing with his issues at home through escapism, through drink and drugs. And I won't go more into that there because I do talk about it in detail in the vlog and say that it could be spoilers. There is something in here that pushes it past my limits of being redeemable, and I wasn't enjoying it at that point, so that stopped me giving it 5 stars. But I did really like this. It did break my heart in multiple places, and I think the next book will kill me off. So yeah, I'm definitely excited to carry on. And last but not least, we have my 5-star book this month, which is my reread of A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J Maas. I really hoped I had a new book in my 5 stars, but unfortunately we just have my reread. But I did have a fantastic time with this. I was going through and physically annotating my book, which was, yeah, it was a good time. I definitely don't think this is the best fantasy that's ever been written. Probably wouldn't be a 5-star if I reread it again now for the first time. But I just had an absolutely fantastic time reading it again. It's so much fun. It made me so excited to carry on with the series. And yeah, I'm really glad I got the opportunity to read it again. If for some reason you have avoided the hype and you haven't read this book, I would recommend it. Like, I know that Sarah J Maas is just hyped for seemingly no reason, but trust me, there is a reason. This series is good. This isn't the strongest one, but they do develop into just something fantastic, and I'm very excited to carry on reading them. So there we have it. That is my wrap up for September. And can you believe, out of those, I'm only keeping 3 books that I read in September. Isn't that wild? For me, I'm normally like moving a stack of 15 books back onto my shelves, but this is incredibly manageable in terms of shelving, and we've unhauled a good amount. So I'm really happy with how the month went overall. We've read some books, unhauled some books, and yeah, only have select favourites to put back on my shelf. Please do let me know down in the comments if you have any opinions on any of these books. I would love to talk to you about them. But for now, that's all I have time for. So thank you very, very much for watching this video. I really do hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!